A few days ago, my delivery guy saw me, face to face. And it was scary. See, for the past couple of weeks, I haven't had much time to cook. Well, that's a lie. It just doesn't really feel like I know how to cook anymore. It's like I got hit with the Men in Black Pez dispenser, you know? I went back to being a film student, dumping soy sauce into a hot pan and choking half to death on all the fumes. So, yeah, I've been ordering food pretty much every meal, by the odd bowl of dry cereal. Now, I'm not used to how fast I get hungry in this body. Not the Demon Hungers 2023 directed by Vox Akuma hungry, just regular hungry. And I try to have one of those nearby during the day. I like my bowls of dry cereal, but, I tend to forget. But yeah, no, Jesus, the story about my delivery guy. So, I decided one day that I wanted a burger. I think ever since I grew a pair of tits and started opening up about my feelings, I kind of stopped giving a shit about what I put in my body. You go a few days in a row just having fast food and you get this weird slimy layer in your throat. And you keep coughing all the time. Now, I've never smoked, but I feel like this has to be what it feels like, only a little bit more permanent. I have the opportunity to turn around, start eating healthy again, and make that throat ooze go away. But someone who smoked a pack a day for as long as I've been eating badly, well, they don't. Do you ever wonder what it's like to be told that you're definitely, without room for correction, going to die? Sir, there's no easy way to tell you this. If you had come in last month, you might have had a chance, but we're too late. You have approximately 5 years to live. 5 years is a long time. But every day we roll a, let's be honest, pretty favorably sided die to see if we live through that day or not. There's a lot of sides on that die. It's probably more of a ball than a die. And one of those many hundreds of sides has a little skull on it. If you land on the skull, you're dead. You're hit by a car. A cinder block falls off a construction site and hits you in the head. We all know that. But the random chance involved makes it feel better. We accept that there will always be a chance, but hey, if I can't see it coming, what am I going to do about it? I've been lucky so far. If every day's a winning roll, why would today be different? Winning rolls on that die for more than 400 years makes you feel pretty lucky, but I don't think it'd prepare me for the knowledge that my death was guaranteed, if only far away. Wait. Listen, I know I should get back to the story about the delivery guy, but I just thought of a really, really stupid analogy, okay? So bear with me. So, in the famous game Old School RuneScape, regardless of which attack style is used, magic, range, melee, whatever, the damage dealt is calculated and confirmed the instant the game realizes that you, or an NPC, is doing that attack. regardless of how long it takes for that attack to actually hit something. It doesn't matter what the goblin on the receiving end of an ice barrage does now. It's going to travel through the air over a few seconds, and then he'll see the big 5 above his head and die before he hits the ground, where he transforms into a pile of bones and 5 GP. It makes me wonder what I'd think if that happened to me. I hear the sound, and I see the XP drop, and I realize, oh, that's it. No matter what I do in the 2 odd seconds it takes for that ice barrage to hit me, the game already knows that it hits me, how much damage it does, and whether or not that amount of damage equates to how much health I have left, or in simpler terms, whether or not it kills me. I imagine getting told your time to live probably feels quite the same way, at least in the moment you hear it. Oh. The gun's been fired. You're just waiting for the bullet to hit you. It's going too fast for you to roll out of the way now. You're not fast enough to dodge a bullet, you piece of shit. Who do you think you are? What was I saying? Right. So I almost revealed the true nature of the world being a place that has demons and other mythical creatures in it to my delivery guy. He was knocking like someone was chasing him, but I figured I just didn't hear him on time, and maybe he'd been waiting for a while and he was annoyed. I usually forget about food delivery very quickly after I've ordered it, so this happens to me quite a lot. The thing is, this time he sounded so frantic, I ran for the door a little too fast, and I slipped, and I fell. Now I want you to take a look at me. Okay? 7 feet and 2 inches of muscle, horn, wing, and, in a better time, about 60 milligrams of prescription medication. Boom! Ah, fuck! Jesus Christ! I tend to overreact, but it did really, really hurt. I fully smacked my forehead on the floor, and it's not carpeted either. I was going to be fine, but he didn't know that. The door was closed, and to him, it sounded like a bomb had gone off. Sir? He's knocking faster now. Are you all right, sir? And I keep insisting, yes, everything's fine, just took a tumble. Are you sure, sir? Yes. I stand up and, dazed with a brand new fucking mark on my forehead, I suddenly, as is my tendency, forget all about my little situation where I'm trying not to get seen, with all the supernatural appendages. You lot, your little cosplay strategy is funny. But what are the chances something this convincing is not only being worn about the house, alone, but also that it stayed on after I took a fall loud enough to justify finding a crater? If I were him, I think I'd jump the shark and tell the BBC that I'd found Lucifer after he had a massive pratfall when I brought a burger to his flat. So I reach for the door, and I twist the key, and suddenly, like Jimmy Neutron, a brain blast. Oh fuck, what am I doing? This changes everything. It might all be over if my muscle memory suddenly pulls this door open and he sees me. So he hears the click, watches as the door juts open by a couple centimeters, and then, fast enough to split the atom, slams shut once again. Bang! And that bang, I imagine, may have actually been louder than me falling over. He screamed, "Ah!" And I said, "Fuck, I'm sorry, I'm sick, please. Can you leave my food at the door? The code is redacted. Thank you." But the guy is not like the other mistreated, underpaid delivery drivers in this world. No. He didn't rightfully walk off and take his money and go about his day. No. This man, through and through, was a good Samaritan. And he asked me, "Sir, are you okay?" Well, he didn't sound like that. He sounded like, "Sir, are you okay?" And of course, what am I going to say? He wouldn't believe me if I told him what was actually going on. So I told him I was fine. I'm just clumsy, a little disoriented. Get a big good burger in me, it'll be fine, right? Right? Yeah. But I don't know. Maybe the guy was an empath or some shit, but he kept asking, "Sir, if you need help, you should open the door." And I don't know. I've always been good at keeping a good face for people who aren't supposed to know this sort of thing, but I think it slipped for a moment, and he could tell. All I said was, "I'm fine." But he knew I was lying, and he wouldn't leave. "Sir," he said, "my name is Mark." I think, hang on. That's not what his name was in the delivery app at all. It said his name was Callum. And then I thought, wait a minute. Is Mark his real name? Why'd he lie and say it was Callum on the app? Is he filling in for his brother? Maybe he lost his driver status under the name Mark because of a serious lapse in judgment or a horrible crime committed, perhaps. But in order to continue supporting his family, doing the only thing he knew how to do, he made a new account with a fake ID called Callum instead. Meanwhile, Mark has been talking for a while, and I realize I haven't been listening because I'm wondering about just how many times this guy has gone through various delivery services and wondering just how many fake names he may actually have. You know, he might actually be a better liar than me. I just felt this weird pang in my dick, like I just failed a contest at lying or something. Anyway, by the time I managed to set my attention back on the better liar between us, as pathetic as it makes me feel, I hear him saying what sounded like, "Whatever's going on, sir, I can help you." I wasn't prepared at this point in my day to have a Deliveroo guy ask for knowledge beyond his comprehension, but what I needed was someone who would understand me. And for lack of a better explanation for why I did what I did next, my theory about his double, triple life as Sir Mark, Callum, whoever, made me feel like I could trust him. So I decided to tell him everything. Now, I started slow at first, of course. There's no way he'd believe me if I told him I was a centuries-old demon who was still grappling with the guilt of accidentally murdering an 8-year-old boy I'd felt like a father to, so I decided to approach it in more believable terms. I told him I couldn't be around people, and I was lonely. He asked if he could come in, and I quickly told him I couldn't let myself see anyone. To my surprise, he countered it. "I get it," Mark said. "I know how that feels." And I asked, "How so?" And he drops any semblance of caring about my problems and goes off in his own tangent. But little did I know, it turned out to be something I would thank myself for listening to. Something that, well, depending how today goes, it may change my life for the better. Now, I'll paraphrase, but he started telling a story about the chippy he used to work at. Now, notice I say used to. I'm speaking a lot about my double life theory now, because I genuinely think this man may have an even more jaded past than I do, but I digress. This place was a local business. Middling reviews from critics and regular people for those not familiar with the UK. A chippy is a fish and chip shop. Cheap cuts of fish with massive portions of chips, chicken nuggets, pies, great scran, which means food. This place, though, like I said, it was falling a cut below the competition. Mark worked there as a delivery driver on staff long before services like Deliveroo or Uber Eats handled 99% of food deliveries in the world. And every day he come into work, he would need to walk past the owner's office to collect the keys to his delivery van. He said he tended to arrive ahead of time so he could pull up a chair by the door and listen. Now, supposedly, every single time he'd hear something new about the state of the restaurant. Some new strategy that was being proposed to reinvigorate local interest, new menu items, marketing gimmicks, promotional bits, tons of it. However, the owner just never wanted any of it. He was an old bloke, a man of tradition, as Mark kept calling him over and over and over again. Any newfangled way of selling their product would get shot down immediately, especially if it had anything to do with the internet. He was even iffy about marketing via radio, as though he predated pie and mash shops established around 1840 The thing is about chippies, though, although this doesn't apply to all, obviously, not to offend any frequent chippy goers among you, most of the food is bought wholesale and cooked in very much the same way as any other chippy you'd go to. If you think about it, all you'd need to do to differentiate your shop from the next 10 down the road would be to change your menu, but of course, the owner wouldn't have that either. So, the restaurant continued to decline in popularity, and somehow, so too did the quality of the food. The employees had long since abandoned any hope of the business surviving, past a couple of more years, so they were waiting for the day the owner would call a meeting to let them know the ship had sunk. And of course, in that time, they weren't really trying to make the best fish and chips on the planet. Well, of course, eventually, that day did come, but not for the reason you might have imagined. It sounds cliché, like something out of an episode of SpongeBob or King of the Hill, but another restaurant had opened up across the street. Not a chippy, but a burger joint. It's at this point that even through my door, I can almost tell what Mark's face looks like. He starts talking about this new place like a simple-minded citizen of Innsmouth coming face-to-face with Cthulhu for the first time, like God himself reached down and dropped the restaurant there himself. Now, I hadn't heard of it, or at least I didn't think I had, but Mark really wanted me to feel just as awestruck as he was. People would reserve a table at this restaurant weeks in advance for a burger joint, fast food. The place sold out weeks in advance every single night, and the slow descent that the chippy had been going through had changed to become a free-fall skydive into the red. The owner, as you can imagine, was furious. He wondered what could it be about this simple burger restaurant that had driven the local populace so crazy. Yes, he was furious, but for the first time in a long time, he was also curious and wanted to know for himself. So he reserved a table for one. Only he could go, because God forbid this restaurant anyone could go to given a few weeks' notice show its secrets to anyone but him. A week before his reservation, he gets a letter, surprisingly sent straight to the chippy rather than his home. Now, this fed speculation among the employees that the owner never actually left the chippy, which, to this day, Mark swears he cannot confirm nor deny. This letter asks that he arrived exactly on time for his reservation and to wear strictly casual clothing. The owner had a different white polo shirt and beige trousers for all 7 days of the week, so after a lot of huffing and puffing, he dug through his drawers to find an ordinary white shirt and a pair of jeans. Once again, he found these after disappearing into his office, further fueling the conspiracy that he would die if he ever left the chippy, and that his backwards marketing tactics were a part of a deal he'd made with an imp that knew of his own checkered past. Are you starting to wonder why everyone in the story has skeletons in their closet, myself included? It's not important. It's literally not important. The fated night rolls around, and Mark's story, which to his credit was already impeccably told, through my heavy door, it delivered yet another interesting twist. When the owner arrived at the restaurant, there is nothing to be seen, not a patty in sight. The evening's guests all arrive at the same time and walk into the building to find it empty and dark. Were it not for the tables illuminated by faint candlelight. The owner of the chippy, being the self-righteous proud man that he was, decided to push past the crowd to investigate. Each of them had been assigned a table, and, finding his, looked to find no food, no cutlery, no glassware or crockery, but instead a little plastic cow. Up, roll credits. Yes, I was shocked too. Believe it or not, this story actually does have something to do with a plastic cow. I interrupted Mark to say, I've heard of the restaurant with the plastic cow. My dad told me about that place ages ago. Mark's aura was so smug, I could hear the smile on his face. He looked at me with this, at least I felt like he was looking at me like this. It was like he rolled his head back and he looked down at me, not knowing how tall I actually am, and he said, "Unsurprising, sir." And I realized at that moment that I was in the presence of a master storyteller, and I listened closer. My focus did not waver, and I was on the edge of my seat, despite not being sat down at all. David went on spinning his yarn and said that the owner reached down in disbelief and, upon touching the cow, it went, wait for it, moo! It didn't really sound like that at all. It was a weak little McDonald's toy speaker type of way, but as soon as the first moo was sounded, restaurant staff burst from the kitchen, laid the tables neatly, and began taking orders. And that was all the theatrics the restaurant had to offer. But it worked, and its reputation preceded it. The owner tasted the food and said it was all right. He said it was all right. Now, I asked Mark if he'd ever eaten it, but he said, "Of course I have." And I asked what he thought of it. But he just laughed in a low, knowing way. Silly me. I'd almost forgotten we were talking criminal to criminal. Now, the owner came back to the chippy, long after closing, as to be expected, and he was furious. How dare they waltz into his neighborhood and steal his valuable customers with such a novel concept? No one goes to a restaurant for atmosphere. They go for food. He didn't want to, he didn't say that, but seeing this new place so thoroughly win his customers from him made him want to double down even harder than before. He didn't want to resort to their modern tactics. He was a true Brexit geezer, for God's sake. And he was going to make sure that his chippy remained the local pride with good old pies, look at that, and he wouldn't need any modern plastic cows to do it. Supposedly, he'd asked Mark for advice, but shot down every suggestion. It was more of a way of validating his own self-assured plan for success, like hearing someone disagree would make him feel like he was more of a hero defending his chippy from the villains who opposed him. But, as you already know, eventually the chippy was forced to close. And Mark, much to my surprise, said he then went to work for the Plastic Cow restaurant. And it was then that Mark's voice took on a great sadness. But that place soon shut down too, sir. And I felt heartbroken. Why, Mark? What happened? And as it turned out, the Plastic Cow gimmick only carried the restaurant so far. The true twist that gagged me more than the relevance of an anecdote my dad had told me a while back was that, in truth, the food at the Plastic Cow joint was just okay. Not amazing, not terrible. The owner of the chippy, he wasn't being jealous or conceited. He was right. It was just fine. And eventually, the bit got old, and it wasn't worth a long reservation to see a little plastic cow moo and to then, confused and guilt-ridden, eat its dispassionately prepared brother-in-law. I feel, sir, Mark said, and my right hand to God, I promise you, I could hear a tear welling in his eye, that I destroy everything I touch. My heart sank. Mark wasn't an international man of mystery, and he probably didn't have multiple identities. He just blamed himself for 2 restaurants closing while he worked for them, back to back. He felt like a bad luck charm, an omen. Don't hire this guy, or your business will fail. I told Mark not to worry. There's no way these things are in a delivery guy's control. It's the men in suits who decide when something goes out of business. And he thanked me, tearfully. And as he did, I could hear a paper bag being opened. Now, at this point, I'd already made peace with my burger having gone very cold as I listened to this story of epic proportions, so I didn't question him. I asked him, as politely as I could, Why'd you tell me that story, Mark? What a story, Mark! And he said, well, sir, after all that has happened, I still deliver, and I am happy. Maybe it was the heavy atmosphere of the whole world learning my secret last month, or maybe it was how invested I was in his genuinely fantastic storytelling skills. But hearing those words, I started to cry. Hearing this, Mark started to cry too. And there we were, 2 simple-minded blokes stood crying on opposite sides of a big, big door. And I wanted so badly to hug him. Mixed in with everything else, there was this feeling of, I think it was disappointment. Disappointment that he hadn't turned out to be some masked killer or identity thief. I'd thought about taking him by the shoulders and telling him everything I'd wanted to tell myself. Mark, it isn't your fault. One day, you'll deliver for a restaurant and you'll die before it closes. After you do, you'll watch from heaven as it grows and becomes a chain loved around the world. And they'll thank you for being there from the beginning. I felt the urge to at least see him. And against my better judgment, I opened the door. Mark was a lot taller than I'd expected, but of course he wasn't as tall as me. He was 40-something, and he had a moustache. He looked up at me, standing shoulder to shoulder with Shaquille O'Neal, equipped with horns wrapped in pool noodles, with wings sticking out of my back, and, as I should have anticipated, he screamed, and he ran away. I can't imagine I'll see him again, because if he sees a delivery for Vox Akuma on Deliveroo, I doubt he'll absent-mindedly accept it again, having seen what he's seen. Sad that the longest face-to-face interaction I'd had in a month lasted a whole 4 seconds. But then I looked down, and I saw that he'd at least taken the courtesy of dropping the bag with my food on the floor. I picked it up, and I went through it looking for my food, noticing that the staples in the top, as I'd heard earlier, had been pulled out. Looking inside, I wanted to pinch myself. It was a plastic cow. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity. It was like a mythical artifact. This was it. The fabled plastic cow in the palm of my hand. Mark must have held on to it after the restaurant closed down and carried it with him, waiting to pass it on to someone who needed it. It felt like tearing up again. But then suddenly, I incited its wrath. I screamed, "Ah!" and I threw it at the wall. I'm still underestimating my newfound strength. The plastic cow shattered into pieces, leaving a dent in the wall in the hallway. A great sadness overcame me, and I scurried over to try and piece it back together. No good. This cow was long dead. Plastic no more. It turns out, though, that there were more to the plastic cows than met the eye. What was previously in the belly of the cow, now spilled all over the floor, were tiny little white beads. Taking a look at what remained of the cow's udder, it had little holes. And I began to laugh. Not only could the plastic cow moo, you could squeeze the udder and milk it too. I felt like I should have bought a tiny plastic bucket and a tiny plastic butter churn and so on. But I just couldn't stop thinking about how I'd spent so much of the past year amused by the story about this plastic cow, only to blow it up in the moment I got a hold of it, and then to learn something brand new about it. I stayed and stared at those little pieces for a really, really long time. I think I wanted to see a metaphor for myself in it. But funnily enough, I'm the only thing I can't seem to destroy, so I don't think it fits as well as I thought it did. I mean, that said though, I can't count my pretentious pattern-seeking brain out entirely. The plastic cow sat on a table, mostly in the dark, for years, mooing once and then it waited to do it again the next day. It waited and waited and waited, looking up at these people who marveled, smiled. What the hell? What's this cow doing here? Oh, Jesus. It mooed louder than I was expecting. Holy shit. This is funny. Oh, now we get food too? This is amazing. And yeah, that is pretty cool. But the plastic cow had all this milk inside it too, and no one ever knew about that. They were still stuck enjoying the food and thinking about how it could moo. I wonder if it ever started to hurt. You know, it hurts real cows, you know. If you don't milk them, their udders bruise and they get sick. And eventually they die. The cow waited for so long for someone to milk it, and when it finally had a chance, it scared me. I smashed it and the milk wound up all over the floor. Can't use that milk now. It's all dried up. I don't have any king's horses or king's men, so I know I'm not going to wind up putting that thing together again. I did try getting the plastic cow to moo again, but to no avail. It had mooed its last moo. Aww. I liked how the plastic cow could moo. Really, it was all I'd ever known about it. The moo was the center of its whole story. The only reason my dad told me about it was because it could moo. I don't think I'd blame anyone for being upset that it couldn't moo anymore. But at the same time, knowing all the more that I know about it now, I've thought more about that plastic cow in the last few days than I ever did in the year since I heard that story for the first time. The challenge now is to see if you can appreciate the very heavy-handed metaphor I'm laying down without getting hung up on how weird it is to keep talking about getting milked. And yeah, I shouldn't be surprised. If you think it's funny, you can laugh, I don't mind. But if you were a plastic cow, and you woke up one day knowing you were a plastic cow, and you felt your udders hurting, knowing you were going to die if no one milked you, wouldn't you run around begging for someone to come and see? Look, I don't just moo. I can do this too. But how do you get their attention if you can't tell them? Maybe when you start feeling that sting in your udders, it's like hearing the bang of the gun, seeing the XP drop from the ice barrage, hearing the doctor say, there's no easy way to say, oh, I've already been thrown. It's just taking a while to hit the wall. Well, better get settled in, right? After all, once I do, I'll finally see all that milk I was hanging on to, and that's what it's for, after all. No one milks a cow to save its life. They're just thirsty.